Marco was 17 when he told his father he wanted to make music. His father laughed. Not cruelly, just the way a man laughs when he thinks he has heard a joke, and then realizes too late that he hasn't. He covered it quickly with a cough, looked away, said nothing more, which was somehow worse than if he had argued. They lived in a small coastal town in southern Portugal, the kind of place tourists drive through on the way to somewhere else. Salt air, white walls, fishing boats that went out before dawn and came back smelling of the deep sea. His father repaired boat engines for a living. His grandfather had done the same before that. The work was honest and unglamorous, and it kept the lights on, and in their family, keeping the lights on was the closest thing to a philosophy anyone had ever put into words. Marco played guitar in his bedroom, with the door closed. He'd been doing it since he was 11, since his uncle had left an old beaten classical guitar at their house after a Christmas visit and forgotten to take it back. Marco had picked it up that same evening, purely out of curiosity, and something had happened that he didn't have words for, something that felt like recognition, like meeting a version of himself that had been waiting quietly in a wooden box for 6 years. By 17, he was good, better than good if he was honest with himself, and he generally was. He had taught himself everything: chord theory, fingerpicking, the secret mathematics of melody that nobody talks about but that lives underneath every song that has ever made a person feel something they weren't expecting to feel. Hundreds of hours, alone in that room, building something private and serious and entirely his own. But he had played for no one. Not his parents, not his friends, not even Daniela, who sat next to him in physics class and who he had been quietly, hopelessly in love with for the better part of 2 years. The music was his. He wasn't ready to let it be anyone else's yet. The thing that changed it was a funeral. His grandmother died in October. She was 81, and she had been slowing down for years, and her death was sad in the way that expected things are still sad. You see it coming, and you grieve it fully anyway, because love doesn't adjust its volume for inevitability. At the reception afterward, someone suggested music. His aunt looked at Marco. Everyone in the family knew about the guitar, even though no one had ever heard it, and said simply, "Marco, play something." The room went quiet. 12 family members, all of them looking at him. He almost said no. And then he thought about his grandmother, who had smelled of lavender, who had called him her serious one, who had once pressed his face between her small hands and told him, "Whatever it is that you carry around in those eyes of yours, don't keep it in there forever. It's too good to waste." He picked up the guitar. He played for 7 minutes, something he had written himself, alone in the bedroom with the door closed, that he had never given a name, because naming it would have made it feel more exposed than he was ready for. When he finished, the room was completely still. Then his father, who had laughed, or nearly laughed, that evening months ago, put his face in his hands. Not in embarrassment. He understood that immediately. He had seen his father cry exactly once before, at his own father's funeral, and it had looked exactly like this. His mother reached over and touched Marco's arm without speaking. That was the moment the private thing became something else. Not public, not yet, but shared, and sharing it had not broken it. It had made it more real than it had ever been in that closed room. He applied to a conservatory in Lisbon the following spring. The audition required a recording. He recorded it 14 times on a second-hand microphone before he had one he was willing to submit. He sent it at 11:45 at night, and then sat in the dark for a long while, feeling the particular vulnerability of having sent something true out into the world and having to wait to find out what the world thought of it. The rejection letter came 6 weeks later. Polite, encouraging even, the kind of rejection that acknowledges something real was there while closing the door firmly anyway. "We receive many strong applications. We encourage you to continue developing your work." Marco read it twice. Then he put it in his desk drawer, went to the kitchen, made coffee, and stood at the window watching the fishing boats in the harbor for a long time. He was not destroyed by it. That surprised him. He had expected to be. But something in him had already decided, somewhere between his grandmother's funeral and the sending of that audition tape, that this was not a thing he was doing until someone said no. This was a thing he was doing. Full stop. The conservatory's opinion of it was useful information. It was not the deciding factor. He reapplied the following year, with 6 more months of work behind him. He got in. Lisbon was enormous and indifferent in the way that cities are enormous and indifferent when you arrive from a small coastal town knowing almost no one. He was 20, older than most of the first years, which he wore as both a disadvantage and a quiet point of pride. The conservatory broke him down and rebuilt him in ways he hadn't anticipated. The private, self-taught thing he had brought in from the bedroom, that instinctive, deeply personal music, was simultaneously his greatest strength and his most significant obstacle. His teachers were direct about both. He appreciated that, even when it was hard to hear. There were months when the new knowledge disrupted the instinct and everything he wrote felt worse than it had been before. Flatter, more correct, and less alive. He kept going anyway, because he had learned by now that the feeling of going backwards is not the same as going backwards. Sometimes it is simply what growth feels like from the inside, uncomfortable, disorienting, and absolutely necessary. Slowly, over the course of a year, his music became something fuller, more intentional, more capable of doing on purpose what he had previously only managed by accident. He was not the most talented student there. He knew it and was at peace with it. He was among the most committed, and he had learned by now that commitment outlasts talent over any meaningful stretch of time. He graduated at 23 and came home for the summer with no particular plan. He played at a small restaurant on the harborfront on Friday evenings for almost no money. He wrote in the mornings. He walked the same streets he had grown up on and felt them differently, the way you feel the place you come from once you have left it and returned. The way its smallness becomes specific and particular and almost beautiful now that it is no longer the only world you know. One Friday evening, an older man sat at the table closest to the stage and listened to Marco's entire set without once looking at his phone. Afterward, he introduced himself. He ran a small independent record label in Porto. Not large, not glamorous, but real and respected and committed to exactly the kind of music Marco made. They talked for 2 hours after the restaurant closed. The record took 8 months to make. It was recorded in a small studio in Porto that smelled of old wood and coffee. 11 songs, all of them Marco's own, all of them built across the years since the bedroom with the closed door, shaped by the rejection letter, by Lisbon, by the Friday evenings on the harborfront, by his grandmother's hands pressing his face, by 6 years of learning and failing and learning again. The first song on the record was the one he had played at the funeral. He had finally given it a name. He called it Lavender. The record didn't explode. It didn't go viral overnight. It didn't arrive with fanfare or a publicist or a moment that the whole world stopped for. It sold, quietly, steadily. It found its audience the way quiet and honest things always find their audience, slowly, through one person playing it to another person, and that person immediately needing to know who it was. A reviewer called it astonishingly intimate. A radio host in Lisbon played Lavender one evening. The station received more messages about it than anything they'd aired that month. None of it happened overnight. All of it happened eventually. He was 27 the first time he played a proper concert, a small venue in Lisbon, 200 seats, sold out 3 weeks in advance. He stood in the wings before going on and felt something move through him. Not quite confidence, not quite fear, but something that held both at once. The feeling of standing at the exact intersection of who you were and who you worked yourself into becoming. His parents were in the 4th row. His father was wearing the jacket he saved for serious occasions. His mother was already crying before Marco had played a single note. Marco walked out onto the stage. The room went quiet in that particular way that rooms go quiet when they are ready to receive something. He sat down, settled the guitar in his hands, the same relationship he had with it since he was 11, the same private, serious love that started in a small bedroom in a coastal town with the door that stayed closed. He played the first chord, and 200 people leaned forward, almost imperceptibly, almost without knowing they were doing it, like they recognized something, like they had been waiting,
without knowing what they were waiting for until the moment it arrived and told them. He never stopped being the boy in the bedroom with the door closed. He just learned, slowly and at great cost, and with enormous love for the thing itself, how to open the door.